My name is Monk Rowe, and we're filming in New York City for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive at the IAJE Festival. Pleased to have Gene Bertoncini for my guest this morning, and I think we're both a little dazed by all the music and activity going on.
Tremendous event. I think there are about 7,000 people here.
It's amazing to watch the veteran musicians especially try to walk down the hall.
Yes.
There's so many people you run into, and you have to have a conversation.
You know, just getting here was pretty hard. I ran into Nick Brignola and Sid Jacobs and music publishers and Len Triola, Booker, and I mean, I could go on and on. Just getting from the lobby, which is not that crowded at this hour. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. What time is it?
Don't remind me.
And it's nice, though. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be also for me to be recognized. I guess at 63, I've finally gotten to be a bit of a known entity in the jazz world, in the guitar world. So I'm happy about that.
Did it seem like that took a long time?
Yeah. In a way, but in retrospect. It happened so fast. I just had breakfast with two buddies of mine, my roommate from college and my good friend, and this was in 1956. We were in school together. We started school together, and it just seemed like yesterday. And here we are talking and hugging each other from.
Right.
Yeah.
I see from a few notes that I found that. You started pretty early on as a guitar player.
I was 7.
Yeah. You didn't start with something else and go to the guitar. You started right.
Yeah, my dad had a guitar around the house. He was from Italy, and he used to sing Italian folk songs. And it was always around, and I just took to it. I just consider that a great gift, you know.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand that either.
The Italian heritage is pretty strong in music, isn't it?
It is.
Family and the music in the house.
Yeah. Well, it is. If you go to Italy and the history of Italy, I think, with the operas, the Puccini and people like Verdi, and especially when my mother and father were born in a region called Emiliana, where Parma is, where my mother's hometown is, and my father was next door. And Parma was where Giuseppe Verdi and this famous opera house in Parma. Parma is where Giuseppe Verdi was born, and there's a famous Parma opera house, and it's a very musical city. But I imagine there are there's musical cities every place in Europe. But it seems like accordion and guitar are pretty prominent in Italian homes, and for that matter in Polish homes too. But my dad always, our Christmas at our house was where everybody came, because that's where my brother played accordion and I played guitar, and the Italian folks would sing. So music was a great gift from my family and from God, I guess, you know.
I see you were on television at age 16.
Yeah, earlier than that, actually.
Really?
Children's Hour, every Sunday morning. Once in a while, my brother and I would get asked to play and accompany some children, and not that I wasn't. And it was great. And I wandered next door one day, and I saw this great guitar player playing in the studio. This was NBC Studios, and I walked up to him with my little cowboy hat on, and I said, I'd like to play him for him. He said, well, he asked me to play it. It was Johnny Smith, and I played my version of Honeysuckle Rose, and then after that, whenever I did a show, I would go next door, and Johnny would give me a lesson.
Oh, neat.
And then after a while, we became good friends. And, so I got off to a great start, with him.
How did the jazz creep into your consciousness?
I just I can remember when about that age, a little earlier, around that time, I would just go to the radio shows, and there were times that I knew that Benny Goodman was playing on the radio, and I was simply drawn to that music. And I remember I couldn't wait for that show to go on, and just instead of Baby Snooks or those shows in those days, which is before your time, before everybody's time, and Fibber McGee and Molly and those radio shows, I used to listen to the live broadcasts and stuff like that, and that too I don't quite understand why, why that happens, and why you're drawn to a particular work or particular art, except that I could just consider it all a gift. And the gift of being drawn to a music, the gift of wanting to learn that music, the gift of an instrument, of a particular instrument. It's all something that we don't have choices, really. It's just we do make a choice, but the choice is something we really want. And why we desire those things is a big mystery. I often get irritated at people who think they've created their own gift.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. They feel like it's all them, instead of recognizing the fact that it's really something else at play.
Is it the gift that's given to you, but then you have an option, perhaps, like, what are you going to do with it?
Right. That too. Then I guess you can take some credit for that, for the pursuit of that gift, but also there are so many circumstances in life that help you along the way. Having a good set of parents, or an older brother who was always supportive, and people along the way who've always applauded and encouraged me, and some people aren't that fortunate. And they come out great anyway. That's an amazing thing. People that have hardships, like people growing up in Russia, who've had to learn jazz from listening to the radio, and didn't have a nightclub to play in or a place to have a jam session. They just had to do it all on their own. And I know a great couple of Russian musicians and Polish musicians. Just amazing.
You had other interests besides music too, didn't you, growing up?
I like girls.
Okay, well that's good.
I knew that's what you were referring to. No, I have a degree in architecture. I fell in love with architecture. I used to copy the plans out of the New York Times on Sunday, real estate section. And I did some work in construction. My dad always rebuilt 2 homes, and when we were growing up, and so I was always kind of interested in the building stuff, and I always thought I might be in that area. And my high school advisor said, well, when I told him I also liked drafting. In those days, we actually drew with pencils and T-squares. I was really upset to visit the Frank Lloyd Wright office and school in Taliesin, Arizona, and to see that everything was computer. Everything, they don't use, maybe if you're lucky, they might do a sketch for you. But in those days, and that was such a, it was to have that white piece of paper and the tools to draw with, to make lines. That was very nice. I enjoyed that a lot. I still would enjoy that too.
Do you think that had any effect on that interest in the way you play?
Yeah, I do. I think I like to plan stuff. I like to. When I play a piece of music, I usually arrange it, and I usually think of a concept for it, and have an area where there's improvisation. I like to think of the guitar as my little orchestra or a big band. and I do arrangements for my big band, and I play them, and I work out fairly complicated things. I was fortunate in that I fell in love with the music of, aside from jazz players, the music of Julian Bream, a great English guitarist, and I heard his interpretation of the Ravel, Pavane, and the amazing orchestral qualities that the guitar has. And so it's really worth the effort of trying to arrange things for the guitar. So in that sense, the way an architect would present a set of plans or a colored drawing of a building to a client, I think that I do the same with the music in a concert. I like to present a finished set of plans to an audience.
Yeah.
And but in the middle of that, there's this, just as in a big band. I went to hear Maria Schneider's band the other night here, and I heard her wonderful arrangements and everything, and the band plays those arrangements. She writes new ones, but they play those arrangements as is, and the difference every night is the spirit of the evening, whatever happens, and the sections where the guys get a chance to improvise.
Right.
And that's what I feel about the guitar. You know, I can do, and I don't feel like I'm cheating by playing the same arrangements. Of course, you know, every night there's some things you do off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Which you can't really do with a big band, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, so.
It gets a little unwieldy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can tell that kind of thinking that you have especially when I listen to your duo work with Michael Moore.
Yeah.
You know, you guys seem to have like minds with that. He seems to be a perfect guy for you to.
Yeah, we have another magical kind of gift, the rapport. We're doing a couple of things together coming up. We haven't done as much in the past few years because I've embarked on a bit of a solo thing, and he was out of the country for a while. But you know, when we get back together after maybe having not played for a couple of years, and it's just like yesterday. It's just like we have this big concert coming up soon at the Museum of Art in Boston, which is a nice thing.
Yeah, I bet your music would sound great in an art museum.
Yeah.
1961, I see you did some work with a number of guys, Buddy Rich.
Right.
And Sam Most. That's the name I like
in the
to
band,
see.
Yeah. But Sam was, well, when I got out of school, one of the first things I did after graduating from architecture was get a job in a club in the Bronx, a little bar and grill called the Capri. And the trio was Mike Maneri on vibes, and a then bass player named Johnny Morris, who was also a wonderful pianist. And we put together a lot of things. Mike and I got together and rehearsed a lot of complicated lines, somewhat like Red Nova and Tal Farlow did years before. And so we had these wonderful arrangements, and we played them whenever we could. And eventually Mike got the job with Buddy Rich. And then about a year later he called me, and I got my sort of chance to play with the band. And I went down to Birdland for the rehearsal. And Mike was doing all these charts that we had worked out together, and Sam was playing, you know, the other lines. And so I went to the rehearsal, and I had it all worked out. I had practiced it again. I played all these lines. And it looked like I was reading the music, too, because I had the music as a reminder. I remember doing about 10 of these things in a row, complicated stuff like that. If you know, would have looked amazing to anybody thought I was actually doing it, you know. After about 10 of them, I made a mistake, and Buddy dropped the sticks, and he says, "Are you with us?" So, that was and then he left. He says, "I'll see you tonight."
How big a group was that?
It was just a quintet.
Just a quintet.
Flute, vibes and guitar, bass and drums.
Wow.
And piano. That was a sextet. And, you know, Buddy later, you know, right away became a friend, though. He was very nice to me, but it was the best training I had for the Marine Corps, which was coming up.
Oh.
Yeah, working with Buddy.
Yeah. Did he ever pull any of his practical jokes on you?
No, I was there when we used to have to meet after every set backstage at Birdland, you know, and he would say, "What'd you do that for? The third bar of this, and I told you not to do that before." And and what was that? And then we'd have like a drill instructor, you know.
Is that right?
And then, but he was difficult on a couple of guys in the band once in a while, and the audience he was difficult. So I remember when there was a guy there making a little noise in front. He said, "Where are you from?" The guy said, "I'm from Pittsburgh." He said, "There's a bus leaving in 10 minutes. Be under it."
Under.
And I remember there was a guy there, a younger guy with an older woman, you know, and they were talking. He says, "Hey kid, you always go out with your mother?"
Wow.
But he was, you know, I mean, we loved him for that too, I guess, you know. I mean, he was a very, very brilliant musician. I mean, if once he had something, and it was just amazing to watch it, to get his time feel. It was so strong. It was just, I don't know any drummer that has quite that impact that he had, the way he played, and he once he learned something, which was right away, no one could play it better.
I was going to say he must have had amazing memory because even when he had his big band, he never read music, right?
No, he never read music.
Yeah,
No, he was in awe of guys who could read.
Oh.
It's one of the things he really had a lot of respect for me, because later on when I saw him when I was doing the Tonight Show, I was actually doing the Tonight Show. I'm not sure where it was, if it was in those days or a little later. And you know, he would, when he ever came as a guest on a show or something like that, he just look at all the guys like, you know, with a lot of respect. Because of that. But no one could do it better than Buddy in terms of like leading a big band. Once he had that music, you know, once he heard the chart, he heard how it went, forget it. He had, you know.
Wow. What was your first chance to record? Do you remember that?
Well, I guess my first most important thing was when I produced my own record with Mike Moore. I mean, I was doing the studio work all the time, and I was part of a lot of records, you know. So I saw a web page, not a web page, but you know, one of those internet.
Yeah.
What do you call that
Website.
stuff?
Website.
I don't know those terms, you know.
Right.
Email. No.
No, I think it's probably a website you saw.
Yeah, and it had my name and all the records I'd been on.
Neat.
You know, and it's like there must have been 500 to 1,000.
You should get a copy of it.
Yeah, I have it home somewhere.
Great.
And I've done a lot of film dates. And in New York, when I was just at sort of the tail end of a certain kind of vintage guitar player, I was at there were guys like Tony Mottola and Bucky Pizzarelli, Barry Galbraith, and Howie Collins, and Al Caiola, Al Casamentis, all good. Darn unknown, all these, and the younger crew like David Spinoza, and the guy's gonna hate me for forgetting. I worked a lot with a guy named Jay Berliner, great, and Billy Syker, Well, anyway, these Ralph Casals. We were still getting calls for a lot of recordings and film dates, and I did a lot of stuff in studios, and all of Burt Bacharach's work, all of Tony Bennett's records, and so, you know, there was always the young guy on the block, and I was that for a while. There was always that, particularly with drummers. There was a guy that was on every date. I remember a guy named Dennis. First there was Bobby Rosengarten when I first came up. He was doing all the work. And then a guy named Bill Lavorgna, who started conducting recently for Liza Minnelli. Then there was a guy named Dennis Sywell, who was always on every date. And then, and after that, the last big gun that was, there was a guy named Donald McDonald for a while. And the guy, oh, he's going to hate me. The guy who lives in Rochester, he used to play with Chuck
Steve Gadd.
Steve Gadd was on every date.
Yeah.
You know?
So when you come to the studio for a date,
Yeah.
you would not have seen the music beforehand, is that
Not
right?
really, no. A couple of times the contractor knew it was very difficult music. And one time, John Williams came to New York to do a movie called... well, John Williams came to New York.
Okay.
Missouri Breaks, it was called.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he had written, the contractor thought, a very difficult part for me and Jay. It was like, you know, the country group Flat and Scruggs?
Yeah.
You know, one of those real long country solos in harmony, you know. And so he got us the part the night before. And I was really grateful. Because, you know, John Williams, yeah, I wish I'd even done a better job. Jay was great, though.
Yeah.
Jay Berliner really was marvelous.
Well, what's, can you recall some of your favorite, out of that 05 to 1000 things that you've played on? Is there any particular events that stand out?
Well, I mean, the albums with Hubert Laws were great for CTI,
yes.
all those things.
Those are great things.
Yeah, and I always loved the dates with Tony Bennett. You know, Johnny Mandel came in, Roy Burns, Torrey Zito, great conductors, great bands. Saul Goodman or Grady Tate on drums, George DeVivier or Richard Davis or Ron Carter on bass, and the wonderful saxophone sections, which were Al Cohn and Zoot Sims and all those great players in the string sections and the big recording studios. And then my years on the Tonight Show in New York, for a couple of years, you know, I'd go in and that trumpet section with Doc Severinsen as the lead trumpet player, Clark Terry and Snooky Young and Jimmy Maxwell. Going to that studio at NBC every day. I shared that show with Tony Mottola for 2 years.
You guys kind of worked out who was going to do what nights, is that right?
And then during my tenure there, for a whole year I did a show called That Was the Week That Was for NBC, and then occasionally the Kraft Music Hall. And the rhythm section for Peter Matz in the Kraft Music Hall was Derek Smith, Mel Lewis, and Richard Davis and myself. And all the dates with Don Elliott in recording dates, the Madison Avenue dates was always Mel Lewis and Richard Davis and myself. And boy, I've been through a lot of, you know, when you think about just falling into things, you know, and I was a pretty good reader, not a great reader, but I mean, I used to be able to cover whatever they wrote. And I guess my interpretation of things was what they liked as well. And then when I started playing the classical guitar, I started getting, that was about the time the bossa nova came in, and I was very friendly with Raul Gilberto. He used to borrow my guitar to do concerts, and I learned how to play bossa nova from his records. And I just had barely started to play that way, and I got a call from Ahmad Jamal to do a big date on samba rhythms, and then I said, sure, I'll do it. And I listened to Joao's record of Quiet Nights, and then I just took that little bit of information, the basic bossa nova beat, to Rudy Van Gelder's studio in New Jersey, and there was Richard Evans' big orchestra, and O.C. Johnson was playing drums, and Richard, and it worked out great.
Wow.
I had, I just used to say yes, you know. I just figured, it seemed like you're never called to do things that you can't, you know, you're always called to do things that they know you can do.
Yeah, but you've also risen to the occasion, I can tell.
You know, I think I have, you know, but probably because I could and not even realize it. You know?
Did you prefer a certain kind of guitar work over another? I mean, you obviously had to play, you played acoustic,
Yeah.
but you also had to play electric.
I really liked it all. I liked when they wrote a nice line. I just liked when they wrote a line. You know, I had done record dates where there was this big, beautiful big band, and the days they used to call 3 guitar players in and hand you like a rhythm part. And one guy would do chicks, just that, just make a sound, a noise. And I can remember spending 3 hours doing, and the guys would come up, great, man, you were great, you know, what a great guitar player. And I said, wow, jeez. Or play like a, you know, play like a little, you know.
Boom, ba-lick,
Yeah, all that junk, you know.
So you got in on...
Fantastic. Get Gene, he can do that, man.
What were some of the pop acts that you might have played in the studio with?
Well, I guess Burt Bacharach was, I would consider him pop music, you know. I mean, it was good music in its own way, and he used to really get carried away with whatever little thing I did, or, you know, oh, man, he did that. You hear what he did there? Bing! Or something like that. And I used, you know, I loved it. I mean, of course, it was nice to be appreciated. But I loved the date where I could be creative a little bit. And on Bert's dates, too, I used to do these, like, classical guitar fills that he liked a lot. And I liked when I had a line to play, though. Most if it was a film date, or the guitar had a melodic line to play instead of just a lead sheet of some kind.
Did you happen to play on an album with Jackie and Roy called Time and Love? Does that ring a bell with you? It was a CTI thing, I think.
I did an album with them, but I don't know if that was it. Was you remember the rest of the guys on it?
I can't think of the arranger right now, but I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
It's a great record. Wayne Shorter, Charles McPherson, I mean,
yeah,
boy, that's a very varied list of people and different styles, too.
Yeah, well, you know, I think one of the guys that helped me out the most was Ron Carter, you know. There was a club on the west side called The Guitar, and Ron asked me to do it with him, so it was just me and him in this little club. It was partly owned by Kenny Burrell, and all the guys would come down because of Ron, and Ron was honored me by, you know, kind of liking what I did, just played tunes together, and I think he recommended me for a lot of things. Right now I'm working for him at City College, teaching in his jazz program up there. And what was the question?
The question was talking about Wayne Shorter and...
Okay, I think part of Ron's magic might have gotten into the ears of producers in those days. And I know Ron was on the Charles McPherson date, and Ron was on the Wayne Shorter date, and they may have asked Ron, or somehow the word got around about my playing. And so I remember Wayne's date, I went in there, and, you know, I heard about this mysterious player, you know. This player who played jazz 909, as far as I was concerned. You know what I mean? Advanced jazz.
Yeah.
I said, what am I getting into here, you know? I go in and I see 3 percussionists. I think it was Billy Hart, Alphonse Mouzon, and then some Italian guy. whose name I forget. And there were two bass players, I think, Ron and Cecil McBee, and Dave Friedman on vibes, and I forgot, it might have been, I don't know who the piano player was. And Wayne starts explaining his charts, and he says, I want this to feel like the wind here, and this here thing here, and there were sketchy kind of things, and there was enough music to read and react. And I reacted to things, and I played, and we did one take of things, you know. I remember it was like one or two takes, and the guys would, you know, respond, and there came out the album called Odyssey of Iska, and I got a lot of nice feedback from it. And Wayne called me about a couple of months after the record had been out. He said, Gene, I love what you did on the CD. So I'm putting this little group together, and we're going to do an album, and I'm going to rehearse. I would love you to be a part of it. And I said, no. I said, you know, I've just started my own little duo, and I'm really thinking about kind of doing this, my own personal work. And I wasn't quite that comfortable in the studio. I told him, you know, I felt I was just going by the seat of my pants. And but I'm so, you know, I was so glad that he called and thanked him very much, and I couldn't do it. And what I did was turn down the first Weather Report album. That's the one it took.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you notice, there wasn't guitar on that
There
album.
was not.
And I didn't say the whole telephone conversation because I thought it would give it away. But he said, I have this bass player, Miroslav, and Alphonse Mouzon, and Joe Zawino on piano, and said, we'd love to have you on guitar.
I'll be darned. You finally said no once, and it was a...
Yeah, it was. Well, you know, I'm not too sure that was... It wasn't a mistake, because I think I could not have resisted the success that group had. You know, I would have gone out on the road probably and done concerts with them, and probably would have delayed my most important work, which is getting into the solo work and the duo work with Mike.
Yeah, that's a good story, though.
Yeah. And,
do you still do a lot of studio work, or you've cut back on that?
I don't know. They've cut me out.
Yeah, yeah.
There's nothing in there.
Yeah.
I just spoke to one of my favorite arrangers, Jack Kortner. You know, I think that so much of it is done on the computer now.
Right. I was going to ask you if you had...
I did a record date yesterday.
Really?
2 days in a row. It was with. Yesterday was a string quartet of all jazz string players, violins, and Skitch Henderson was on piano, and Peter Appleyard, and a lady bass player, Nikki Perot, and Joe Ascioni and Bucky Pizzarelli, and it was for a label called Arbor's Records.
Oh, sure.
And so we did. It was nice to be in the studio, and I was given a lot to play. I mean, a lot of jazz playing, acoustic and electric.
That may be the first like quartet type thing that they've put out. Arbor's Records, I think.
Maybe, I don't know. I have to look at the
I'm
catalog.
somewhat familiar with that label, and they.
Yeah, are you?
That's great.
Yeah. But I mean, there's no studio work. I mean, like.
Not like it used to be at all.
No, and if I get called for studio work, it's usually for what I do. It's like to accompany a singer, or to maybe play some Brazilian stuff, you know.
Yeah. What would be your advice to guitar students in colleges these days to prepare themselves for what's available now?
I think that the most important thing is to develop your repertoire, learn as many tunes as possible. I think still the standard songs are still what gets you to gigs in life, if you can play. If they know you can play all the tunes, and if you're you know, if you can improvise, and bend with situations and be a nice person. Above all, just follow your heart and keep the faith. There's room for everybody in some fashion. As we can see at this convention, there are now 7,000 people here, and there are 7,000 more musicians probably this year looking for work, but everybody's got a smile on their face, you know, and they're all trying, and you know, success has very little to do with money. It's got a lot to do with your ability to play and the chance to play, you know. And I would say not to turn down anything because of a lack of, you know, because it didn't pay enough or something like that. Get as many experiences as you can playing. And however, there are guys that try to always, you know, get you to play for nothing that shouldn't do that either. So
there's a certain line that you
don't take that too far. Yeah,
right.
So there are people that can't afford to pay a little more money to musicians, but they always keep them on that servant level, you know, and that's a shame. But I think there is room for everybody. And follow your heart, follow your bliss, as the Joseph Campbell said.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I just had breakfast, as I said, with my roommates. One of my roommates was a pianist in college, and he later went on to be, through the Marine Corps, a pilot for Delta Airlines. And he retired from Delta Airlines, and he's now a junior in college studying music.
Oh my!
And he's happier happier than he can ever be. And the other guy is studying bass, and he headed the whole Wendy's chain commercials. He did all those commercials. Those are such a nice bunch of commercials for Wendy's. He was in charge of all of that for years, and now he's retired. Charlie Rath is his name, and we talk about that music, and they love me because I stayed with it, you know. But I had this other special gift, but here we all together, or just talking about music.
Well, you speak very well of your philosophies about music and life too. I know you've been doing quite a bit of. You do some Eastman work. Right,
Eastman, the New England Conservatory. This year I'm teaching at William Patterson. I took Vic Juris's place out there because the king got too busy there. I call him the king.
Really?
He's a monster. I love the way he plays. He's working with the heavies too, David Liebman and Phil Woods. He's a monster player.
Wow.
So I'm honored to be there for him. And City College with Ron, and occasionally Banff, and workshops whenever I can. I love that. I mean, if my life was a bunch of what I did yesterday, a workshop, and combined with a concert, I'd really love that. Primarily on solo guitar, or with a duo, you know.
Yeah.
And I love playing with other guys too. So it's
let me play a piece here off your new CD. If I can find, we had just talked about this tune.
That's good. Can you hear that? Yeah, leave it right there.
It's nice.
It goes somewhere though, you know.
So this is straight acoustic guitar, right?
Yeah. You know, I think we can use any material we want. Keep it going.
I will.
Yeah. I just want to point out something. that you can be inspired by any material. You know, it doesn't have to be hip, you know.
Uh-huh.
If you love a piece of music, and I love this song, I loved it in the movie.
Right, me too.
And I like to take tunes like this and change the harmonies, you know, play it simply and then explore it a little bit.
Oh. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Now change your key. That was it.
Oh, that is gorgeous. Really nice.
So with a piece of music like that, you, if there's anybody that in the audience that you know is maybe turned off by really hard mainstream jazz playing or stuff like that, and if you can bring them in with something pretty like this, which I love anyway, and most people love it. They may not even admit it, you know. I don't know, but most jazz players love this thing. Hey, man, your Edelweiss was exquisite, you know. And this is coming from a hot tenor saxophone player, you know, or your cavatina from the Deer Hunter, man. That was heaven. Most people love the music, and the one thing I love about the guitar is that you can really do these things on it. It is the little orchestra. Yeah. And then you can go from there into you know, something maybe hipper. Bring out the electric guitar and play something hot, you know, or blues. Yeah. And they're right with you because they fell in love with Edelweiss.
You got it covered. So. What's in the near future for you?
I'm hoping what's in the near future is more of solo concerts and another solo CD. And I know I'm going to do some more work with Michael Moore. We'll always work together a little bit. And some more festivals, I hope. I think I'm playing at a festival in Poland next year. And I have, I'm going to North Carolina to do some concerts there coming up, and doing a thing in Ohio, a tribute to Joe Beam, playing a whole evening of his music, which is one of my other CDs that actually was voted one of the top 10 CDs in Brazil. Just me and percussion. Wow. It's called Joe Beam, Someone to Light Up My Life. And I had to settle for Joe Beam. I haven't met her yet. So he's lighting up my life. Pretty good, though. And, all right. Okay. Well, it's been great talking to you. Yeah. I appreciate your coming today. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think you're going to have a good year, and I hope some of those things come through for you. It's a beautiful piece. I'm sure the rest of the CD holds up to it also. Oh, thank you. All right. Oh, I think you'll like it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Monk. Okay.